You are live.
Thank you. Welcome to the April 7th edition of the City of Annapolis Planning Commission. Tonight we have Commissioners Teresa Rubio Dorsey, David Iams, Diane Butler, and myself, Alex Klein, the chair. We have various staff members, our recorder and attorney, and we are ready for our roll call.
Mr. Klein,
Present.
Mr. Iams,
Present.
Ms. Butler,
Present.
Ms. Rubio Davies.
Dorsey.
I'm sorry, is it Dorsey or Davies?
Dorsey. Ms. Rubio Dorsey.
I apologize. I thought I had the latest. I'll change to that. Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Great. Thank you, Kimberly. Okay, I'm going to share the agenda. Okay. Here's our agenda tonight. We've done our roll call. So we have, first item is approval of minutes from March 31st. Let's see.
Now, Alex, for these first two items, I'm going to have to recuse myself because I wasn't at this meeting. So I didn't know if you wanted to put those and hopefully somebody else will show up, or will you be able to make a vote?
Let's see. Yeah, that's true. We don't have a quorum to. That's very true.
Yeah, we could approve. We could definitely approve the minutes next time too, if the people who are present can't. We don't have a quorum.
Right. I hate to put off the findings for Bay Village, but without a quorum, we really can't do that.
Alex,
But they might show up later in the meeting too.
right, was Ben at the meeting that where you had the site design for Bay Village? Because I'll call him and see if he's going to be coming.
Yes, he was.
Okay.
I mean, I'm correct. I need a parliamentarian to weigh in here, but in the past, we've approved stuff with 3, or do we need 4?
4 is your quorum. You need a quorum. It's in your rules. You need 4.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I think we should. Yeah. Why don't we just skip over that and we can go on to the public hearing. Is that okay with everybody?
Fine with
hopefully
me.
we'll come back to that. Okay. So we're on to our public hearing tonight is for 0622 medical cannabis dispensaries for the purpose of allowing medical cannabis dispensaries to certain zoning districts within the city of Annapolis, adding a use subject to standards and adding certain definitions and generally relating to medical cannabis dispensaries.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, this is John Arison.
Hi, John.
Robert's rules requires a quorum to open the meeting. Once the meeting is opened, it can be an item can be voted on by the members who are eligible to vote.
Well, that would be true if it was not specifically in the Planning Commission rules that they adopted, that a quorum for them to vote on anything is 4, regardless of what they have it in their rules. We've checked on this before.
Right.
Okay.
It's in the rules of procedure for the Planning Commission.
Well, hopefully Ben will be able to join us.
Right. I was just trying to leave him a message. He's not answering. He's not answering his phone right now, so I'll text him.
Otherwise, these are findings, so you can approve them via email, I'm assuming too.
Yeah, can we do that? That's.
What was that, David?
If these are just findings, can you guys approve them over email as well? Just if Ben doesn't show up?
Well, they're not a recommendation, they're an approval. I think that we should ask your attorney. Is Chris Beard on the call?
Yeah.
I think that's something. Is Mr. Beard? I thought Mr. Beard was on the call.
He's here. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
It looks like he may have dropped off.
Uh-oh.
Well, somebody will come back and tell us.
Yeah, if he comes back, we can ask him. That's a good question, David.
Okay.
Okay, I've texted Ben. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Great. Well, back to 0622. So I see Alderman Gay is the sponsor and he's here. Do we want to, who's going to make up the staff presentation? There was a very well researched and documented staff report that I have here. But does somebody from staff want to sort of highlight anything in that?
Well,
And then we
I
can-
think that I would highlight, I think we looked at in reviewing the new legislation, which was it was an alternative to what was proposed last year, which did not move forward. And what we looked at with this, well, we looked at what was in this legislation itself, where it created the 2-mile dispensary buffer and the 1,000-foot school buffer. And we mapped that out, and that was one of the 2 maps that was attached to it was an attachment to the report that we sent you. And it really virtually eliminates any locations within the city where it would be possible to have a dispensary. So then we started looking at some alternatives, and in looking at alternatives, one of our jump off points for that was to look at what is in place in Anne Arundel County in terms of buffers. And that was the 1-mile dispensary buffer and the 750 school buffer. So that's the second map we're presenting you with,
Right.
which opens up a lot more possibilities for locations and makes this a feasible use to locate. Then we also looked at what the Planning Commission had recommended when they reviewed the legislation last year, and we incorporated some of the comments that, and I've actually pasted them verbatim on page 2 into the staff report.
That's what I'm showing here on the screen.
Right. So
Yep.
that these were, so we've incorporated the distance from existing dispensaries. We've incorporated the distance from public and actually charter schools and private schools. We did not incorporate a distance from residential lot lines because that would take us back to a scenario where there would be, the residential districts and commercial districts are so close to one another in the city, that would eliminate once again any possibilities. In terms of additional standards, we added several things in our recommendation of items that are actually in the county, and they have to do with signage in the windows and with no loitering. In looking at the bigger picture issues like, say, security, we did a lot of work on looking at the state regulations and what the state system has in place. And the state actually has now created a whole enforcement arm for their commission, and which that's all detailed in the staff report on what they investigate. And I think there is extremely thorough, complete oversight of this use at a state level. All the places are inspected twice a year. Nobody wants to have any complaints filed against them because they're, some of it's punitive. The state really does have, they issue sanctions, they require consent orders, they monitor you even more closely. So we felt like a lot of the policing issues are really handled at that level. So we have given you a recommendation, which is at the end, in the last of the report, with some modified conditions.
Yeah, so thank you for you and Eric for putting that together. I think it's well researched and well written, has a lot of really good information in it. And so at this point, do any of the commissioners have questions of Jackie or Eric on what they presented to us?
Yeah, I have a question about the circles. So I'm looking at the yellow circle that is in the middle of Eastport with a dot.
Which
So
map?
Yeah, so Yeah, so what
Oh,
I'm
the map
showing,
Mhm.
so I'm showing the map that includes their recommendations. So the yellow circle, the large yellow circle, is the radius around the existing dispensary that's in the county. And the other, yeah, the other smaller ones are either public or private schools.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you can see that you know there are a fair number of places in the city where this use could be accommodated subject to the standards. And you know, prior, if I scroll back, this was the map with some original larger boundaries. So you can see the 2 mile radius is the large yellow, and then the larger
They're blue
blue circles around schools, which leaves, you know, if you were to put one other dispensary here, that would basically block out the rest of the city. So I think that staff was thinking this configuration was too limiting, and why this 1 mile buffer between dispensaries and 750-foot buffer between schools met the conditions that we asked for last time around, as Jackie mentioned. So anybody else have
Yeah,
questions?
mine is just, you know, you took off the residential lot lines, just because if we had them in there, it wouldn't be able to do it. Is
Well,
that, I mean, I don't see that as a reason to take them off, just because it wouldn't work if we kept them as. Now, who has the residential lot line? Is that a county thing, that the counties have that right now? And why would we be less restrictive?
well, I think the county is a very different situation from the city in terms of, you know, everything in the city is closer together than it is in the county. And if you
Understand.
add in residential lot lines in the city, so for example, we don't have distances from residential uses for any of our commercial uses, regardless of what they are. And that's it. And we have many projects that have residences in them, mixed use projects, but that maybe they're not zoned residential. So it really wouldn't be an all inclusive recommendation, but to say that, you know, so it would really then apply to just some residential uses. If you were, you know, looking at adding in a recommendation to create a distance barrier for residents, I mean, it's virtually going to eliminate any locations in the city where you could have this use.
Yeah, and I just think about, you know, what we see over at the Rite Aid, where people are in this, you know, parking lot and there's not any enforcement, and, you know, you want to have that in your backyard. That's where I'm concerned.
Are you talking about the dispensary at West 2 Shopping Center?
Dispensary on West Street, yeah. Where people are in the parking lot. It's like, you want that in your backyard? I don't know. So I'm just concerned about.
I guess we're not seeing that same thing in terms of impact in that shopping center. Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about the crime, you know, that issue?
Yeah, I mean, we try to be objective in you know, in looking at the actual impact of these types of establishments. And there's very little documented criminal activity happening around the one established dispensary at the edge of the city. So, I mean, well, you know, there could be a perception that there's loitering that you're referring to, but that's why we put in this recommendation that there should be a no loitering sign. But it's not a crime to be in a parking lot. You know, I mean, it's not. We are trying to be judicious here in sort of how we write this. So
yeah, I'm just concerned about
very little almost no documented pattern of criminal activity around dispensaries nationally.
Right, and there's actually historically a loitering problem in that specific shopping center, actually associated with the auto parts store, and people.
But the no loitering sign, I think it would address maybe what your concern is, so.
Well, I think of a no loitering sign, it doesn't mean much, but that's all well and good. I just remember Ben had the objection, and a few other people had noticed at the last meeting that there were a lot of people using things from the dispensary in that parking lot.
A good point.
And just because it's not documented.
I think it's challenging to sort of make a judgment about.
I mean, I've seen it myself. I've personally witnessed it myself. So, I mean, the documentation thing doesn't mean a lot to me. That just means it's not being enforced. But whether or not, I just don't want it in somebody's backyard.
Well, I understand that. I think that the things you're talking about are also violations of the state law. And, if there are problems in that shopping center with people exiting and doing whatever in the parking lot, that, the state can be brought in to enforce that.
Okay.
They actually have like a whole enforcement group who will come out, investigate that, and put a stop to it. And so, that I think that would be would actually be a more effective way to enforce problems like that with that dispensary. I believe those things are violations.
Well, I think the state would probably be a better enforcement mechanism than the city. I understand.
More questions for staff?
I just have one. I know that Alderman Pindell Charles had some issues. Has she weighed in on this?
I can't really answer that question. I think she has, Alderman Gay might be able to address any of his conversations he's had with other aldermen. We really looked at it more from an impact point of view and evaluated it more on what we believe would be the planning impacts of the use.
Okay, well, if nobody has more questions, I think we should open the public hearing, and then I'd really like to hear from Alderman Gay.
Agreed.
So,
sounds good.
Okay, so I declare the public hearing on 0622 now open, and Alderman Gay, we'd love to hear what you as sponsor, if you have anything to add to the staff report or any other pertinent information for us.
Good afternoon, everybody. First, want to thank the staff. I've enjoyed working with them all on this, Jackie, Eric, and Mike. And I think we've got a winner this time around. To answer the first question, the Office of Laws made it clear that legislation cannot be crafted based on the personal feelings of one individual older person or based on one individual ward. And so I have not discussed in detail, what Ward 3 would think of the legislation. However, based on previous conversation in the first go around, we understand that they do not want to see additional dispensaries in Ward 3. And so we created the 1 mile buffer from existing dispensaries that would eliminate adding new dispensaries in Ward 3. You can see that on the map display here on the screen. Existing dispensary is the dot, and then the large yellow circle around it would be the buffer, eliminating options in Ward 3.
That's great. Thanks for that information. So, Alderman Gay, do you know if there's a legal opinion that says you can't carve out a ward from a specific zoning use?
What we were told previously were that we could not create legislation, and I understand that there have been 2 pieces of legislation since, but hey, I didn't sponsor those pieces. But we were told that we cannot craft legislation for particular wards. And so,
And was there an opinion written? I'm just wondering if you can share that with us, because that's good information for us to have, because I didn't know that. And I know in the past, in several past generations of our planning commission, that has been done. So there may have been a change in the state law, and that would be good for us to have.
it's been stated in our council meetings. I'm not sure if there's any written statements.
It's actually based on case law, land use case law in the state of Maryland, that you can't, that the zoning regulations have to be consistent through. If you have R2 regulations, you have to have the same R2. It has to be the same for all parts of the jurisdiction that have that type of zoning.
So I wonder how we were doing it wrong for so long. Is Chris Beard available? I just have a quick question for him. He might know.
I don't, when you say doing it wrong for so long, I don't think that's
I
been
think
the
we've
case.
carved out, no, I mean, yes, I think we've carved out wards, but I'm not saying it was wrong or
No.
right. I just didn't know there was a
To my
rule.
knowledge, we have never
No.
done anything by ward.
I mean, I don't think since I've been.
Other
on
than
the
having
commission.
32 zoning districts, which in some way it sort of rhymes with carving things out by ward, because we do have some districts that are only in certain wards.
Yeah.
So, I mean, by virtue of having this, plethora of, and I'm sure Eric can chime in here if he wants to, but having all of these zoning districts, it's not quite spot zoning, but it almost looks that way sometimes.
Right. So I'm curious. So like for the historic district and stuff, because it doesn't apply to all Ward 1, when you're saying historic district, it's a zone that's understood to exist and it's protected, but it's because it's a historic district. So you can't.
Historic district is an overlay zone.
Right.
And there are actually 7 different zoning districts in the historic district. An overlay zone is different than, is a different thing.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me. I'm very curious. So so Chris is not available now, or is he gone? He's gone. I'll just ask when he gets back, because just for an opinion, because maybe he can draft one for the next one. I'd like to get it right and not do it wrong.
Well, we don't do legislation that way, Diane. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
That's fine. You don't have to know, Jackie. We'll just ask our outside attorney.
No,
Thanks.
we'd be happy to investigate it, but I'm not aware of any legislation that we have that's zoning district specific.
Thank
You're
you.
talking ward specific. So.
Thanks.
Well, thanks, Alderman Gay. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to this discussion, or?
No, I think we've met the needs of the committee in the previous they've stated. I appreciate Jackie explaining why we didn't have residential line requirements. It just would be virtually impossible in some of the communities that we have here in the city. And so that's why that was left out. But I think otherwise, this is a solid piece of legislation, and the concern, as well as, people smoking in the parking lot, those things can be handled by the police. They aren't meant to be handled in legislation. And so, putting residential lot line requirements in wouldn't deter that. And so I think this is a good attempt here to bring medical dispensaries and hopefully recreational dispensaries, as we see the Maryland General Assembly has pushed for a referendum this November. And so looking forward to hopefully having that legislation as well.
Great, thanks. And the other thing that I would note is there was some a recommendation that some of the language be synced up with the state law, so that if that changed, that we wouldn't have to go and change our language. I thought that was a good addition, regardless of what ends up being passed. I think it's always good to not have to do tit for tat changes based on when sort of the governing legislation or the enabling legislation changes. It's bad for us to have to go and change something after that. So did anybody else have any further questions for Alderman Gay, or?
I just have one question, actually. I'd like to just hear Alderman Gates, just in some insight. I noticed the disparity study was mentioned regarding just business disparities for women and minority-owned businesses, you know, throughout this kind of contracting. I mean, sorry, for these types of businesses. And I'm just curious that I know it's included in this recommendation, but there wasn't any language or commentary or any kind of options or proposals to address that. Do you have any other insight you can maybe share?
Absolutely. I'm actually pleased that you've asked that. The city of Oakland, California put forward a very progressive program to allow for nonviolent offenders to apply for applications first within their city limits. And I can share that with the committee. I've shared it with the Office of Law and hope to do the same here. It will require, after the legislation being passed, 0622, for us then to pass a resolution moratorium banning the to stop the issuing of licenses to then pass the Oakland model. And that's something that I think we should definitely look into. And I've had conversations with Stephen Rice and Hope Stewart as well about that, as it relates to just making sure that communities can be engaged in this, whether it be in the processing or actual business side.
Thank you for that. And so coming from the Bay Area just recently, you know, the Oakland model, it's pretty much the model that, you know, most cities are following. And so I was curious too. And I noticed that we mentioned minority and women owned, but we don't mention veteran owned. And so sometimes when we look at just diverse businesses or even just requiring a local ownership, can usually sometimes address those disparities as well. So just something to think about.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
And Alderman Gay, are there not also changes being proposed at a state level with regard to licensing requirements that might create funding for funding in this area to enable minority businesses to, you know, right now the cannabis industry, it's so expensive to get any type of license. I think it's an incredibly expensive, and I thought that they were proposing some changes at the state level to create a fund that would enable some of these disparity issues to be dealt with.
That was discussed in the House version. I'm not sure if it made it to crossover or not. I can check on the existing bill that's in the Senate and let you know that as well.
Thank you, Alderman Gay.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, so this will get held open to our next meeting, and I encourage the public, if they're interested, to go and read that staff report, because it's very detailed and has a lot of good background information. Just as a refresher, to go to etrackit.annapolis.gov and put in this project number ZTA 2022-001. And this report that I was showing with those maps, especially the ward maps, in the rationale for them is there. So I really encourage people, if you're interested in this topic, to go and look at those. Okay, so that's being held open until April 21st. So coming back to the approval of findings for Bay Village.
Mr.
Jackie,
Chairman, I beg your indulgence for a moment, if I may. Your rules of procedure say that 4 members of the Planning Commission shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of business. That means to open the meeting. Decisions on any application or other matter before the Planning Commission shall require the affirmative vote of the majority of the quorum. If 3 people of the 4 that are there, that's an affirmative vote of the majority of the quorum. That's your rules of procedure. And if Mr. Iams wants to abstain, you can take a vote with 3 votes in favor of the findings and Mr. Iams abstaining from it. That's your rule.
So I think you are correct, because if memory serves, and my memory isn't always what it used to be, I believe we have voted when we have had 3 of 4 present because of an abstention. Do you remember, Jackie?
Well, I think that we've had two different positions on it, and I think when you're just making a recommendation to the city council on legislation, as opposed to being the final, adopting an opinion on something, we may have done that. I'm just remembering that we've had this conversation before, and Chris was involved, and we looked at all the rules, and there were emails, and it was determined that that you needed 4 people to have that 4 is a quorum even for a vote.
You have 4 you have 4.
We have the quorum. The majority. Okay, so anyway,
I'm looking at the plain language of your rules of procedure. And it's very clear.
It's been discussed before, and what came out of that before, as I recollect, was that you need a quorum, that it has to be the 4 people who actually heard the application.
No, that's not what your rules say.
Okay, John, you have.
Okay. Let's stop. Stop, please, both of you.
Thank you,
Stop.
Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
Okay.
Anyway, Ben,
it's my recollection that we have done that, and given that the discussion that we had at the last meeting, there was no controversy on this decision. And let me just display quickly the decision. So what we put in two conditions here, that number 14 and number 15, that we all agreed on, and that there's really no controversy here. And so I don't see any reason we shouldn't take this vote, because otherwise it just delays. It's not really fair to the applicant, especially when there's no controversy here. It's just going to delay it 2 weeks. So I'm gonna move that we vote on these findings as they were presented to us by Mr. Beard.
Are you seeking a motion, Chairman?
I have made that motion. And does anybody want to second that?
I will second.
I'm sorry, you, Teresa, you will second that?
I will second.
Okay. So any further discussion? Does anybody want to comment on whether we should do this on the commission?
Well, I'm not going to vote either, but I'm not comfortable either way. I mean, I know that we have voted with only having 3 people because we had only 5 people forever.
Right.
But I don't know what, I don't know what we actually voted on, if it was just recommendations or if it was positions. But I don't think we need people. I'd rather have Chris Beard tell us what's going on. That's why he's our attorney and should be here.
What difference does it make if it's a recommendation or adoption of findings? It's an official action of the commission in both circumstances.
Okay, Mr. Aronson, that's fine. Please, no more.
Right, I'll mute.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, so I think, again, because if Bob or Ben were here, what they said last time is they were, they were good with what we have in front of us here. So I think there's very little risk in terms of voting on this.
Yeah, and I have no idea what Bob or Ben said last time, so I wasn't there, so I can't make a determination.
I mean, Teresa, Diane, and I were there, and do you guys agree that was my recollection is correct there?
Yeah, I didn't feel like there was much controversy. I just wanted to look at the findings quickly while I haven't had a chance today, and I know I looked at them before and they looked okay, but yeah, I just don't like the idea of the outside people telling us what to do, because there are our rules, and if our liaison says one thing and our attorney isn't here, it feels a little uncomfortable to be kind of bullied into making a decision right now. But anyway, let's see, do you have the language handy?
I have the language up. So I have the language up. I went ahead and pulled it. It's under the Planning Commission's documents, rules and procedures, under section 7.1, quorum and voting. It's very
no, I was looking at the language for the
oh, sorry.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
it's conditions 14 and 15 on the screen.
14,
So
15, the applicant
14
shall
is the
provide,
applicant should provide a structural cell system for tree root growth under the Bay Ridge sidewalk for protection of the sidewalk. In the event that this, and 15, in the event of the demise of the primary white oak tree, a tree of similar species should be planted in that space as a replacement. So those were
Yeah.
the two.
is there any way to add to the 14 that, to condition number 14? So basically the applicant shall provide a way of structural cell system for a tree root growth under the Bay Ridge sidewalk for protection of the sidewalk. It also helps protect the tree, but can we say, for as an example, Silvacell, so they know what we're talking about? And there are other products that do the same thing, but I don't want someone to be like, oh, we just put extra soil and compaction and that works. We really do want something that will protect the sidewalk and kind of
Well,
guide the tree.
you know, the discussion the discussion with Mr. Urban was the term structural cell system was adequate in a generic way without specifying a product.
Well, I hate to specify a product, but I just want people to realize that it can't just be what we did. You know, we've had a couple of trees die recently where, you know, the developer said that they're doing the right thing and it didn't work. So like, I think we have to get more specific.
Structural cell system is a very specific system, at least according to Mr. Urban.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's probably better than nothing. I'm feeling, after watching a bunch of trees just come down in the last few days, really, like we got to do more to protect our legacy trees. But okay, that's pretty straightforward.
So I'm willing to call for a vote. All in favor of approving this application, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any dissensions and abstention? Okay, and Mr. Iams abstains. Okay, great. Well, sorry for that little bit of confusion, but I think this was the right thing to do in this case. So, congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you. I'll pass it on to the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, that brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is adjournment.
Yay, let's get out of here.
Anybody want to make a motion? Anybody want to make? Oh,
I'll make a motion
to adjourn. Okay. Second?
Second.
And any discussion? The only thing I'll mention is 38 minutes. Not bad. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, please take us on